Divorced and alone, she took her baby to a cheap motel. She never imagined a millionaire was next door. Hi, my beautiful, precious family. Let's begin with a short prayer, hand in hand, soul to soul. Dear God, thank you for this beautiful family. Please strengthen my body, calm my heart, and guide my healing. Bless every person watching with peace, love, and joy beyond measure. Amen. This is your Mr. Peter. I'm still in New York for treatment, but by God's grace I'll be back in just 2 days, ready to wrap you in love again through my stories. I miss you all more than words can say. Please listen, my family. If you see my videos on any other channel, that person is stealing my content. They download my old work, make slight edits, and pretend to be me. They are not part of us. Please don't support them. Report and unsubscribe. To all the beautiful new members who joined us recently, welcome to the family. You are not just a viewer, you're home now. Please introduce yourself in the comments, your name, where you're from, and how you found us. It would mean the world to me. And my sweet family, don't leave the story halfway. If the message feels long, you can skip it, but please stay for the story. Your one like and one kind comment can help keep this channel alive. James is here today with love, and I'm with you in spirit. Now let's begin this story, with faith, with warmth, and with all the love that connects us.
The divorce papers in Jessica Horton's trembling hands felt heavier than the 6-week-old baby sleeping in her arms. She sat in her beat-up Honda Civic outside the Sunset Motel on Connecticut Avenue, watching the neon sign flicker between vacancy and darkness. The March wind howled through the cracked window sill, and she pulled Jackie closer to her chest, breathing in that sweet newborn scent that had become her lifeline. Just 48 hours ago, she'd been Mrs. Billy Kemp, living in their small apartment in Northeast D.C., still believing her husband would embrace fatherhood. 2 days ago, she'd still believed love could conquer anything. Now she was nobody, with nowhere to go and exactly $247 in her worn wallet. Irreconcilable differences, the papers stated in cold legal terms. But Jessica knew the brutal truth that would never appear in court documents. Billy Kemp couldn't handle being responsible for anything more demanding than his PlayStation and his pipe dreams of rap stardom. When Jackie had arrived 2 weeks early, screaming, hungry, and utterly dependent, Billy had looked at his son like he was an alien invasion. "I never wanted this," he'd said 3 days ago, gesturing at Jackie like he was broken furniture. "I'm 24, Jess. I got a whole life ahead of me. I can't be tied down with some crying baby." "He's your son," Jessica had whispered, still sore from her emergency C-section, still weak from the difficult birth. "Maybe. You were pretty friendly with that teacher from your school before we got married." The accusation had hit her like a physical blow. Marcus Williams had been nothing more than a colleague, someone who'd helped her with her classroom when she was pregnant and struggling, but Billy had twisted even that kindness into something ugly. Yesterday morning, while Jackie had been napping and Jessica was finally managing to shower for the first time in 3 days, Billy had packed everything valuable from their apartment. The TV, the laptop, even the good silverware her grandmother had given them as a wedding present. He'd left the divorce papers on the kitchen counter next to an eviction notice. Apparently, he hadn't paid rent in 2 months. "Billy, please," she'd begged when he came back for his clothes. "Where are we supposed to go?" "Figure it out," he'd said, not even looking at Jackie. "You're so smart with your college degree and everything. You figure it out." He'd taken their good car, too, leaving her with the Honda that needed a new transmission and burned oil. By the time Jessica had realized how thoroughly he'd destroyed their life, Billy was gone, along with their savings account, their security deposit, and any illusion she'd had about the man she'd married. Now, sitting outside this rundown motel in one of D.C.'s transitional neighborhoods, Jessica felt the full weight of her new reality. She was 26 years old, a former elementary school teacher who'd had to quit when Jackie was born early and had complications. She had no family. Her grandmother, who'd raised her, had died 2 years ago, and she'd never known her parents. Her friends from work were sweet, but none of them were close enough to take in a new mother and baby indefinitely. Jackie stirred in his sleep, making those tiny sounds that could either mean he was settling deeper into sleep or about to wake up hungry. Jessica prayed for sleep. She'd been nursing him almost constantly, and her body was exhausted from producing milk on too little food and too much stress. The motel looked like something from a 1970s crime show, single story, with doors that opened directly to the parking lot. The paint was peeling and several of the room numbers were missing letters. But the sign said, "Weekly rates available," and when Jessica had called from the payphone at the gas station, the woman who answered had sounded kind. "You need a room, honey?" she'd asked. "We got clean sheets and working heat. That's more than some folks got." Jessica had almost cried at the simple kindness in the woman's voice. Now, gathering her courage, she carefully lifted Jackie and grabbed the diaper bag that contained everything they owned. A few changes of clothes for both of them, diapers, formula, though she was trying to nurse exclusively to save money, and the small amount of cash she'd managed to scrape together from her purse and the change jar. The bell above the motel office door chimed as Jessica entered, and a woman looked up from behind the counter. She was perhaps 60, with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, and the kind of face that had seen everything but still chose kindness. Her skin was a rich brown, and her eyes were warm with genuine concern. "You must be the young lady who called," the woman said, setting down her paperwork. "I'm Kate Morrison. I manage this place." "Jessica Horton," Jessica said, shifting Jackie to one arm so she could reach for her wallet. "I called about the weekly rate?" Kate's eyes took in Jessica's appearance, the clothes that hung loosely on her postpartum body, the exhaustion in her face, the way she held her baby like he was the only precious thing left in her world. "Room 24, Kate said, pulling a key from the pegboard behind her. "It's in the back, away from the street noise. Quieter for the baby." Jessica's eyes filled with tears at this small consideration. "How much?" "200 for the week. That includes utilities." Jessica counted out the bills with shaking hands, watching her safety net disappear. Kate noticed. "You got family coming to help?" Kate asked gently. Jessica shook her head. "It's just us." Kate was quiet for a moment, then reached under the counter and pulled out a small bag of groceries: bread, peanut butter, milk, some fruit. "Somebody donated these earlier," Kate said, though Jessica suspected that was a lie. "Shame to let them go to waste." "I can't." "You can and you will," Kate said firmly but kindly. "We look out for each other here. That's how we survive." Jessica accepted the bag, her throat too tight to speak properly. "Thank you." Kate walked around the counter and led Jessica toward the door. "Room 24's got a little kitchenette. Nothing fancy, but the stove works, and the refrigerator's cold. You need anything, and I mean anything, you come find me. I'm usually here or in room 1. The room was small but clean, exactly as Kate had promised. There was a double bed with a faded but freshly washed comforter, a small table with 2 chairs, and a tiny kitchen area with a half-size refrigerator and a 2-burner stove. The bathroom was cramped but functional, and there were clean towels folded on the bed. Jessica set Jackie down on the bed, surrounding him with pillows so he couldn't roll, and sank into one of the chairs. For the first time in 48 hours, she felt safe enough to really cry. The tears came in great, silent sobs that shook her whole body. She cried for the marriage that had failed, for the future she'd planned that would never happen, for the fear of raising Jackie alone with no money and no support. She cried for the exhaustion that felt like it might kill her, and for the love that felt too big for her broken heart. Jackie woke up as the sun was setting, his cry sharp and demanding. Jessica picked him up, changed his diaper on the bed, and settled into the chair to nurse him. As he latched on, his tiny hand gripping her finger, Jessica felt some of her strength return. "It's just you and me, baby boy," she whispered to him. "But we're going to be okay. Mama's going to figure this out." Through the thin walls, she could hear sounds of life. A television, someone talking on the phone, the distant hum of traffic on Connecticut Avenue. In the room next door, she heard a man's voice, low and tired, talking to someone. She couldn't make out the words, but the tone was sad, defeated. She wasn't the only one who'd ended up here broken. As Jackie finished nursing and drifted back to sleep, Jessica made a mental plan. Tomorrow, she'd start looking for work, anything that would let her keep Jackie with her. She'd figure out childcare, healthcare, all the impossible logistics of being a single mother with no resources. Tonight, though, she just held her son and let herself feel grateful for this small, safe space. Kate's kindness had reminded her that there was still goodness in the world, even when everything felt dark. Jackie slept peacefully in her arms, trusting her completely to keep him safe and fed and loved. And Jessica made him a promise. No matter what it took, no matter how hard she had to fight, she would build them a life worth living. She just had to survive long enough to figure out how. Outside her window, the motel's neon sign continued its flickering dance between hope and darkness, and Jessica chose hope. Chapter 2. The Sound of Silence Breaking. Brad Halfin had never realized how deafening silence could be until he discovered his wife in bed with his best friend. He sat on the edge of the motel bed in room 25, still wearing the same Armani suit from 3 days ago when his world detonated. The scotch in his hand had gone warm, forgotten as he stared at the water stain on the ceiling that resembled the shattered map of his life. 72 hours ago, he'd been Bradford Halfon III, successful real estate mogul, devoted husband, man who seemingly possessed everything. He'd owned a penthouse overlooking the Potomac, a summer estate in the Hamptons, and a portfolio worth more than small nations' GDP. More importantly, he'd believed his marriage was built on 5 years of genuine love and shared dreams. Now he was just Brad, hiding in a cheap motel because he couldn't bear returning to the penthouse where he'd discovered Donna writhing beneath Marcus Chen, his business partner and supposed best friend, in the bed they'd shared since their wedding night. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was professional suicide. Marcus had access to all of Brad's development projects, his client lists, his financial information. The pillow talk between him and Donna had probably cost Brad millions in competitive advantages and insider knowledge. But somehow that hurt less than the image burned into his brain of Donna's face when she saw him standing in their bedroom doorway. She hadn't looked ashamed. She'd looked annoyed that he'd come home early. "Brad, this isn't what it looks like," she'd said, not even bothering to cover herself. "It looks like you're fucking my best friend in our bed," Brad had replied with a calmness that surprised them all. "Don't be dramatic. It's just sex." Just sex. 5 years of marriage reduced to just sex. Marcus had scrambled for his clothes, muttering apologies and excuses, but Brad had already stopped listening. The conversation that followed was a blur of accusations, justifications, and the slow, methodical destruction of everything he'd thought was real. "I never loved you the way you loved me," Donna had finally admitted, sitting naked on their expensive sheets without an ounce of shame. "I tried to, but I'm not built that way. You were safe, Brad, stable, good for my image." "Your image? You think I married you for your personality?" She'd laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You're boring, Brad. You go to bed at 10. You read financial reports for fun. And you actually thought I wanted children with you. Marcus makes me feel alive." Brad had left without another word, checking into the first motel he'd found that took cash. He'd turned off his phone, ignored his assistant's increasingly frantic calls, and spent 3 days drinking scotch and questioning every decision he'd ever made. The worst part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the dawning realization that Donna was right. He was boring. He'd spent his entire adult life building wealth and status, thinking that success would somehow transform him into the kind of man women loved instead of just married for security. Through the thin walls of room 25, he could hear signs of life from the neighboring rooms. An older man coughing, a television turned up too loud, and from room 24, the sound that was slowly driving him insane, a baby crying. It had started around midnight on his first night here. Soft at first, then building to the kind of desperate wails that spoke of real need. But it wasn't the crying that got to him. It was the voice that followed. A woman, young by the sound of it, singing lullabies in a voice so pure and full of love that it made his chest ache. She sang everything from traditional songs to what sounded like improvised melodies, her voice never losing patience, never showing frustration. Just endless gentle comfort for a baby who clearly needed her. "Hush, little baby, don't say a word. Mama's gonna buy you a mockingbird." Brad found himself listening for those moments when the crying would stop and her voice would emerge, soft and soothing. It was the most beautiful thing he'd heard in years, certainly more beautiful than anything in his sterile, expensive penthouse. On his second night, he'd given in to curiosity and looked out his window. He'd seen her then, a young black woman walking slowly back and forth in the parking lot, bouncing a tiny bundle in her arms. Even in the harsh light of the street lamp, he could see her beauty, natural hair that caught the light, a face that was tired but radiant with love, curves that spoke of recent motherhood. She moved with a grace that seemed impossible given her obvious exhaustion, swaying and humming as she walked. When the baby finally settled, she'd looked up at the sky for a long moment, and Brad had seen her lips moving in what looked like a prayer. Now, on his third night in this place, Brad heard her voice again through the walls. The baby was fussing, not full-out crying, just making those sounds that babies make when they're not quite satisfied with the world. "I know, sweet boy," she was saying. "I know you're still hungry. Let me see what I can do." There was the sound of movement, a refrigerator opening and closing, then the unmistakable whir of a bottle warmer. Formula, Brad realized. She was giving the baby formula at, he checked his watch, 2 in the morning. "There we go," her voice came again. "Mama knows what you need." The tenderness in her voice was like a knife to his heart. This was what he'd wanted with Donna. This kind of love, this kind of devotion. He'd imagined coming home to a house filled with the sounds of children, a wife who would look at their babies the way this woman clearly looked at hers. Instead, he'd been married to a woman who saw children as inconvenient accessories and love as a transaction. The baby's cries intensified suddenly, and Brad heard the woman's voice change, taking on a note of real concern. "Jackie, baby, what's wrong? You're burning up." There was the sound of rapid movement, drawers opening, papers rustling. Brad found himself sitting up straighter, suddenly alert. Okay, she was saying, and he could hear the barely controlled panic in her voice. "It's probably nothing. Just a little fever. Babies get fevers." But her voice was shaking now, and Brad could hear her crying, not the gentle tears of exhaustion, but the terrified sobs of a mother who didn't know what to do. "Please, baby, please be okay," she whispered. "Mama doesn't know what she'll do if something happens to you." Brad was on his feet before he realized it, his hand on the doorknob. Every instinct he had was screaming at him to help, to do something. This woman was clearly alone, clearly struggling, and her baby might be sick. But what could he do? He was a stranger, a man, probably the last person she'd want showing up at her door in the middle of the night. She'd likely call the police if some random white guy started knocking on her door at 2 a.m. Still, he found himself stepping outside, the cold March air hitting him like a slap. Her door was closed, but he could still hear her voice through it, speaking rapidly on what sounded like a phone call. "Is this the nurse hotline? My baby has a fever and I don't know. He's 6 weeks old. I don't have a car right now." Brad walked closer, not close enough to be threatening, but close enough to hear. "I understand you can't give medical advice over the phone, but I don't know what to do. I don't have insurance yet, and the emergency room will cost—" She was quiet for a moment, clearly listening to instructions. "Okay, thank you. I'll figure something out." The call ended, and Brad heard her sink into what sounded like a chair. "It's okay, Jackie," she said, but her voice was breaking. "Mama's going to take care of you. We'll walk to the hospital if we have to. It's only a few miles." Walk to the hospital. At 2 a.m. With a sick baby. Brad knocked softly on her door before he could talk himself out of it. The silence was immediate and complete. Then, very quietly, "Who is it?" "I'm Brad. I'm staying next door. I couldn't help but overhear, 'Is your baby okay?'" More silence. Then, "He has a fever. I was just— We're fine." "I have a car," Brad said simply, "if you need to get to a hospital." "I don't know you." "No," Brad agreed, "but your baby is sick and it's 2 in the morning, and you don't have a car. Sometimes strangers are all we have." He heard movement, and then the door opened just a crack, still secured by the chain. Through the gap he could see part of her face, beautiful, exhausted, terrified. "Why would you help us?" she asked. Brad thought about that for a moment. "Because 3 days ago I thought I knew what mattered in life. Now I realize I didn't know anything, but I know that babies shouldn't suffer because adults are too proud or too scared to accept help." She studied his face through the crack in the door. You're not some kind of predator or something. I'm just a guy who's having the worst week of his life, same as you," Brad said honestly. "But I have a car, and your baby needs medical attention." After what felt like an eternity, she closed the door. Brad heard the chain sliding back, and then she opened it fully. She was even more beautiful up close, maybe 25 or 26, with intelligent eyes that were red from crying and exhaustion. She was holding a tiny baby wrapped in a blue blanket, and even Brad could see that the child's face was flushed with fever. "I'm Jessica," she said quietly. "Brad. And that's Jackie." She nodded, looking down at her son with such love that Brad felt something shift in his chest. "Let me get my keys," he said. Chapter 3. Coffee at Midnight. The emergency room at 3 a.m. was a cathedral of human suffering, but Jessica had never been more grateful for fluorescent lights and the sharp scent of disinfectant. Dr. Grace Martinez emerged from the examination room with the kind of smile that instantly dissolved the knot of terror in Jessica's chest. Behind her, Brad stood up from the waiting room chair where he'd remained vigilant for the past hour, his expensive suit wrinkled and his hair disheveled from anxious hands. "Jackie's going to be fine," Dr. Martinez said, and Jessica's knees nearly buckled with relief. "It's just a minor viral infection, very common in babies his age. His fever's already coming down with the medication we gave him." "Are you sure?" Jessica asked, accepting Jackie back into her arms. He did look better already, less flushed, sleeping peacefully. "Absolutely. Keep him hydrated, alternate infant acetaminophen and ibuprofen every 4 hours for the next couple of days, and call if his fever spikes above 101. But honestly, he's a strong, healthy baby. His reflexes are excellent. His breathing is clear. You're doing a phenomenal job with him." Jessica's eyes filled with tears of relief. "Thank you. I was so scared." "First-time mom fears are completely normal," Dr. Martinez said kindly. You did exactly the right thing bringing him in. Better safe than sorry with babies this young. As Dr. Martinez handed Jessica the discharge papers and a small bottle of infant medication, she glanced between Jessica and Brad with curious eyes. "The father?" she asked quietly. "No," Jessica said quickly. "Just a friend. A neighbor, actually." Dr. Martinez nodded, but Jessica caught the meaningful look she gave Brad, a look that clearly said she was impressed by his willingness to help. The ride back to the motel was quiet except for Jackie's soft breathing from his car seat. Jessica sat in the passenger seat of Brad's Mercedes, very aware of the leather interior that probably cost more than she'd made in a year teaching, and tried to process what had just happened. This stranger, this well-dressed, obviously wealthy stranger, had just spent 3 hours in an emergency room with her and her baby. He'd handled all the paperwork while she focused on Jackie, had quietly given his credit card to the billing department before she could protest, and had never once acted like he was doing her some enormous favor. "I'll pay you back," she said finally as they pulled into the motel parking lot. "The hospital bill. I don't know how much it was, but I'll pay you back." Brad turned off the engine and looked at her. "Let's talk about that later. Right now, let's just get Jackie settled." "I'm serious, I don't take charity." "It's not charity," Brad said simply. "It's what neighbors do." Back in her room, Jessica settled Jackie in the makeshift crib she'd created using pillows and the bottom drawer of the small dresser. He was sleeping peacefully now, his fever broken, breathing easy. She touched his forehead one more time, cool and normal, and finally allowed herself to breathe. "Thank you," she said to Brad, who was hovering near the door like he wasn't sure whether he should leave. "I mean it. I don't know what would have happened if—" "You would have figured it out," Brad said with certainty. "You would have walked to the hospital if you had to. I just provided the transportation." Jessica studied his face in the dim light from the bedside lamp. He was handsome in an understated way, not flashy or obvious about it, but with good bones and kind eyes. His dark hair was starting to show gray at the temples, and there were lines around his eyes that spoke of either laughter or stress. Given the circumstances of their meeting, she suspected stress. "I should let you get some sleep," Brad said, but he made no move toward the door. "I won't be sleeping any time soon," Jessica admitted. "Too much adrenaline, too much relief." "I know the feeling." Jessica looked at him more carefully. "Bad week for you, too." Brad's laugh was bitter. "You could say that. Want some coffee?" The words were out before Jessica could stop them. "I mean, it's terrible instant coffee, but it's caffeine." Brad hesitated. "Are you sure? It's late, and you've been through enough tonight." "You just saved my son's life," Jessica said. "The least I can do is offer you bad coffee." They ended up sitting at the small table by the window, sharing a pot of coffee that was indeed terrible, and watching Jackie sleep. The silence between them was surprisingly comfortable for two people who'd met 3 hours ago in a crisis. "So," Jessica said finally, "what brings a man in a $3,000 suit to the Sunset Motel?" Brad nearly choked on his coffee. "3,000? I taught elementary school. You learn to estimate the cost of everything parents wear to parent-teacher conferences." Jessica smiled. "Though most of my parents shopped at Target." "Armani," Brad admitted. "Though it's probably ruined now. I've been wearing it for 3 days straight." "That's either a very good story or a very bad one." Brad was quiet for so long that Jessica thought he wasn't going to answer. Then, "I came home early from a business trip and found my wife in bed with my best friend." "Oh." Jessica felt something twist in her stomach. "I'm sorry." "The worst part is I'm not even surprised. Looking back, I think I knew something was wrong for months. I just didn't want to see it." Jessica recognized the tone in his voice, the same one she'd heard in her own when people asked about Billy. "How long were you married?" 5 years. You?" 2. Though he left when Jackie was 3 weeks old, so I guess it was really over before that. Your husband left you with a 3-week-old baby? The incredulity in Brad's voice was so genuine that Jessica felt tears threaten again. It had been so long since someone had been outraged on her behalf. Billy decided fatherhood wasn't for him, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Along with marriage, responsibility, or paying rent, apparently. Jesus. He cleaned out our bank account and took everything valuable from our apartment. I got served with divorce papers the same day I got the eviction notice. What kind of man walks away from his own child? The kind who sees a baby as an inconvenience instead of a blessing, Jessica said, looking over at Jackie. His loss. Brad followed her gaze to the sleeping baby. He's beautiful. He's everything, Jessica said simply. I didn't know it was possible to love someone this much. It's terrifying and wonderful at the same time. You're a good mother. Anyone can see that. I'm trying to be. Some days I feel like I have no idea what I'm doing. From what I saw tonight, you know exactly what you're doing, Brad said seriously. You recognized he was sick. You got help. You stayed calm when it mattered. That's not instinct you can teach. Jessica felt her cheeks warm. What about you? Do you and your wife have children? Ex-wife, as of 3 days ago. And no, Donna wasn't interested in children, said they would interfere with her lifestyle. What kind of lifestyle was that? Brad's smile was rueful. Expensive. She liked nice things, fancy restaurants, charity galas where she could wear designer gowns and be photographed for the society pages. Children would have cramped her style. Did you want children? The question seemed to catch Brad off guard. He was quiet for a moment, staring into his coffee cup. Yes, he said finally. I always imagined having a family. Coming home to the sound of children playing, helping with homework, teaching them to ride bikes. He trailed off. Sounds foolish, doesn't it? It sounds wonderful, Jessica said softly. It sounds like exactly what children need. Apparently not what Donna needed. Donna's an idiot. The words slipped out before Jessica could stop them, and she immediately felt her face flush with embarrassment. I'm sorry. I don't know her. I shouldn't have said that. But Brad was smiling, really smiling, for the first time since she'd met him. No, you're probably right. I'm starting to think I never really knew her at all. What do you mean? Brad leaned back in his chair, and Jessica could see him making some kind of decision. We met at a charity auction, he said. I was there because my company was donating money for a children's hospital wing. She was there because her PR firm was handling the event. She was beautiful, sophisticated, knew all the right people. I thought I'd found my perfect match. What changed? Nothing changed. That's the problem. She was exactly the same person I met 5 years ago, someone who valued appearances over substance, status over character. I just convinced myself she'd grow to love me the way I loved her. Love isn't something you can convince someone to feel, Jessica said gently. No, it's not. Brad looked at her with something like wonder. You figured that out a lot younger than I did. I figured it out the hard way. Billy married me because I was stable, reliable. I had a good job, my own apartment, no drama. He thought I'd be like a really good roommate who also happened to sleep with him. But you loved him. I loved who I thought he was, or who I hoped he could become. Jessica shrugged. When Jackie was born and Billy couldn't even hold him without complaining about the crying, I realized I'd been in love with a fantasy. At least you got Jackie out of it. The best thing that ever happened to me, Jessica agreed, glancing over at her sleeping son. What about you? Do you think you'll try again? Marriage, I mean. Brad considered this. A week ago, I would have said never. The idea of trusting someone that completely, again, of making myself that vulnerable. He shook his head. But tonight, watching you with Jackie, seeing that kind of love. He met her eyes. Maybe I was just loving the wrong person. There was something in his voice that made Jessica's pulse quicken. Something in the way he was looking at her that made her suddenly aware of how intimate this felt. Sitting here in the dim light, sharing their deepest disappointments with a virtual stranger. We should probably get some sleep, she said, though she made no move to get up. Probably, Brad agreed, also not moving. Thank you, Jessica said again. For tonight, for helping us. I know you didn't have to. Yes, I did, Brad said seriously. Maybe not legally or socially, but yes, I did. I couldn't have lived with myself if I'd just listened to you struggle and done nothing. Most people would have. Most people aren't better than us. They're just luckier. Jessica felt something shift in her chest at those words. This man understood something fundamental about life that Billy had never grasped. That kindness wasn't weakness, that helping others wasn't foolish sentiment, but basic human decency. I should go, Brad said finally, standing up. Let you get some rest. Brad? Jessica stood too, suddenly not wanting him to leave. Would you like to have coffee again tomorrow? I mean, later today. Better coffee. There's a diner down the street. Brad's smile was soft and genuine. I'd like that very much. After he left, Jessica checked on Jackie one more time, then settled into the chair by the window. Outside, she could see the light still on in room 25, and somehow that made her feel less alone. For the first time in weeks, she fell asleep easily, and her dreams were filled with kind eyes and gentle voices, with the possibility that maybe, just maybe, the worst part of her life was behind her. Chapter 4. When Angels Wear Designer Shoes. Jessica woke to the sound of gentle knocking, but when she opened the door, no one was there. Just 3 bags of groceries sitting on her doorstep, like divine intervention. She scanned the empty motel walkway, but the parking lot held only her beat-up Honda and the gleaming black Mercedes she was learning to recognize. Room 25's door remained firmly closed, though she could have sworn the curtain moved slightly. Jackie was still sleeping peacefully, his fever completely gone, skin cool and normal to the touch. Jessica had checked on him every hour through the night, but Dr. Martinez had been right. He was perfectly fine. The grocery bags contained everything she'd been rationing or doing without. Fresh fruit, real milk, organic baby formula, diapers in Jackie's exact size, bread that wasn't stale, and sandwich meat that looked like it came from an actual deli. At the bottom of one bag was a container of what looked like homemade soup and a note in careful handwriting, for new mothers who need their strength. Kate. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. She knew Kate hadn't left these groceries. The older woman was kind, but she'd already done more than enough. This had Brad's fingerprints all over it, from the organic baby formula to the expensive Greek yogurt. She knocked softly on the door to room 25. Brad, she called quietly. I know you're in there. The door opened after a moment and Brad appeared, his hair damp from a shower, wearing jeans and a simple white t-shirt that somehow made him look younger and more approachable than the expensive suit had. Good morning, he said, as if he hadn't just anonymously delivered enough groceries to feed her for a week. The groceries, Jessica said. What groceries? Brad. He had the grace to look slightly sheepish. Kate mentioned that the diner down the street delivers groceries for some of the long-term residents. She must have thought you could use some supplies. Uh-huh. And I suppose Kate also knows Jackie's exact diaper size and my preference for organic produce. Lucky guess. Jessica couldn't help but smile. You can't keep doing this. Doing what? I didn't do anything. I've been in my room all morning. Brad, I'm serious. I can't let you pay for everything. Then don't let me, Brad said simply. Accept it as a gift from Kate, who's probably the kindest person either of us have met in years. Before Jessica could argue further, Jackie's cry drifted from her room, not distressed, just his regular, "I'm awake and I want attention" announcement. "Coffee?" Brad asked hopefully. "I bought a decent coffee maker yesterday. Much better than that instant stuff." An hour later, they were sitting at the small table in Brad's room, which Jessica noticed was identical to hers, except for the expensive laptop on the dresser and the stack of business papers that suggested he was still trying to manage his real life from this temporary refuge. Jackie was lying on a blanket on the bed, kicking his legs and making the happy gurgling sounds that meant he was content with the world. Brad kept glancing over at him with an expression Jessica couldn't quite read. "You can hold him if you want," she offered. "I don't really know how," Brad admitted. "I've never spent much time around babies. It's not hard, just support his head and neck." Jessica showed him how to scoop Jackie up properly, and Brad held him with the careful concentration of someone handling something infinitely precious. Jackie looked up at him with the wide, curious eyes of a baby who was still figuring out which faces belonged to people who mattered. "Hey there, little man," Brad said softly, and Jackie responded with one of his rare, genuine smiles, the kind that lit up his whole face. "He likes you," Jessica said, feeling something warm and complicated unfold in her chest. "How can you tell?" The smile. "He doesn't give those to just anyone. Mostly just me and Kate so far." Brad looked down at Jackie with wonder. "It's amazing, isn't it? How someone so small can be so complete, like he's already exactly who he's supposed to be." "Billy never talked about him like that," Jessica said without thinking, then immediately regretted bringing up her ex-husband. "Billy's an idiot," Brad said flatly, using Jessica's own words from the night before. "Anyone who can't see how incredible this little guy is doesn't deserve to be his father." The certainty in his voice made Jessica's throat tight. "He wanted me to give him up for adoption. Said we were too young, too broke, that it wasn't fair to raise a kid in poverty." "What did you say?" "That I'd rather raise him in a cardboard box with love than in a mansion without it." Jessica touched Jackie's tiny hand. "I meant it, too." "Good," Brad said fiercely. "He needs you. He's lucky to have you." The afternoon passed easily. Brad worked on his laptop while Jessica took care of Jackie, but somehow they fell into a comfortable rhythm. Brad would look up and make funny faces at Jackie when he got fussy, or he'd hand Jessica whatever she needed without being asked. It felt domestic in a way that should have been strange, but somehow wasn't. Around 4 o'clock, Jackie started crying in earnest, the kind of persistent crying that meant he was legitimately upset about something. "What's wrong, baby?" Jessica asked, checking his diaper, trying to feed him, attempting all her usual comfort measures. But Jackie just kept crying, his face getting redder and his wails more desperate. "Is he sick again?" Brad asked, immediately alert. "I don't think so. He doesn't feel warm." Jessica rocked him, sang to him, walked with him, but nothing worked. After 30 minutes of non-stop crying, she was starting to panic. "Something's wrong. Babies don't just cry like this for no reason. Should we call the doctor?" "I don't know. Maybe I just—" Jessica's voice broke. "I don't know what he needs." Brad stood up decisively. "Get his car seat. We're going back to the hospital." "Brad, I can't afford another emergency room visit." "We'll figure that out later. Right now, Jackie needs help, and you need peace of mind." The ride to the hospital was tense, with Jackie's cries filling the car and Jessica's anxiety reaching levels that made her feel sick. Brad drove with the calm efficiency of someone accustomed to handling crises, but she could see the tension in his jaw. At the emergency room, they were seen quickly, Whether because of Jackie's distress or Brad's obvious ability to pay, Jessica wasn't sure and didn't care. Dr. Martinez appeared again, and Jessica felt a surge of relief at seeing a familiar face. "Let's see what's going on with this little guy," she said, taking Jackie from Jessica's arms with practiced ease. The examination was thorough, checking his ears, his throat, his belly, his reflexes. Jackie continued to cry through most of it, but gradually began to calm as Dr. Martinez worked. "Well," she said finally, "I have good news and embarrassing news." "Embarrassing news?" Jessica asked. "Jackie is perfectly healthy. What he has is a classic case of baby gas. Very painful for him, very distressing for parents, but ultimately harmless." "Gas?" Jessica felt her face burn with embarrassment. "I brought him to the emergency room for gas?" "Trust me, you're not the first parent to do this, and you won't be the last," Dr. Martinez said kindly. "Baby digestive systems are still developing, and sometimes they get uncomfortable. Try bicycle movements with his legs, a warm bath, or infant gas drops. He'll be fine." As if to prove her point, Jackie chose that moment to release a tiny burp, followed immediately by a contented sigh. His crying stopped instantly, and he looked around the room with bright, alert eyes, as if nothing had ever been wrong. "Are you kidding me?" Jessica said, but she was laughing now, relief making her giddy. "Babies," Dr. Martinez said with a grin. "They're experts at making their parents crazy." In the car on the way back to the motel, Jessica couldn't stop apologizing. "I'm so sorry," she said for the 5th time. "I completely overreacted. Gas! I can't believe I dragged you to the hospital because my son had gas." "You didn't overreact," Brad said firmly. "You heard your baby in distress and you did everything you could to help him. That's exactly what a good mother does." A good mother would have known the difference between a medical emergency and gas. A good mother doesn't take chances with her child's welfare. You did the right thing, Jessica. His certainty made her feel better, but she was still mortified. "How much do you think this hospital visit cost? For gas?" "It doesn't matter. It matters to me. I'm keeping track, Brad. I'll pay you back every penny." Brad was quiet for a moment. "What if I told you I didn't want you to pay me back?" "Then I'd tell you that's not how this works. I'm not a charity case." "I know you're not. But what if I told you that helping you and Jackie has been the best part of the worst week of my life? That watching you be a mother, seeing how much you love him, listening to you sing to him at night through these paper-thin walls. What if I told you that's the only thing that's made me feel human?" Jessica stared at him, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. "What if I told you," Brad continued, "that I'm not helping you because I feel sorry for you, but because being around you and Jackie reminds me what actually matters in life?" They were back at the motel now, but neither of them made a move to get out of the car. "What are you saying?" Jessica asked quietly. "I'm saying that I haven't felt this connected to anything in years. I'm saying that in 3 days, you and Jackie have become more important to me than 5 years of marriage ever was." "Brad, I know it's crazy. I know we barely know each other. But I also know that when I heard Jackie crying tonight, my first instinct was to do whatever it took to make him feel better. When I see you worry about him, I want to fix everything that's making you scared." Jessica looked at this man who had appeared in her life at exactly the moment she needed him most, who had spent 2 days helping her and asking for nothing in return, who held her son like he was made of spun glass. "It is crazy," she said softly. "I know, but—" She took a breath. "It's also the most honest thing anyone's said to me in a long time." Brad turned to look at her fully. "Jessica, I want to keep helping you, not because you need rescuing, but because I want to be part of this. Part of Jackie's life. Part of yours. What does that mean exactly?" "I don't know yet," Brad admitted. I just know that I don't want this to end when we both check out of this motel and go back to our real lives. Jessica thought about her real life, the job search she'd have to start, the apartment she'd have to find, the thousand impossible logistics of being a single mother with no resources. Then she looked at Brad, who was waiting for her answer, with hope and vulnerability written all over his face. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay, let's see where this goes." Brad's smile was like sunrise breaking through clouds. "Really? Really? But Brad? Yeah. Next time Jackie has gas, we're trying the bicycle kicks first." Chapter 5. The Color of Trust. Jessica's hands trembled as she read the text from her college friend Mira. "Girl, I'm coming to check on you, whether you want me to or not." It had been a week since she'd moved into the Sunset Motel, 5 days since Jackie's fever had introduced her to Brad, and exactly 12 hours since she'd agreed to explore their impossible connection. Now, staring at her phone while Jackie napped peacefully in his makeshift crib, Jessica felt panic clawing up her throat. Mira had been her roommate at Howard University, her maid of honor, and the only person who'd consistently told her that Billy was a selfish child masquerading as a man. Mira was also a family therapist with finely tuned instincts for bad situations and dangerous men, though she worked in Baltimore, not D.C. There was no way she was going to approve of Jessica's growing feelings for a mysterious stranger in an expensive suit. The knock came 2 hours later, sharp and insistent. Jessica opened the door to find Mira standing there with her arms crossed, wearing her "I'm about to save you from yourself" expression. "Mira." "Don't you Mira me," her friend said, pushing past Jessica into the small room. "I've been calling you for 3 days." 3 days, Jess. I was ready to file a missing persons report." Mira was everything Jessica wasn't: tall where Jessica was average height, light-skinned where Jessica was deep bronze, boldly confident where Jessica tended toward careful deliberation. She was also fiercely protective and had never softened a harsh truth when she thought Jessica was making a mistake. "I'm sorry. It's been complicated." "Living in a motel with a newborn is definitely complicated," Mira said, her voice softening as she looked around the small room. "Oh, honey, it's really this bad?" "It's clean," Jessica said defensively. "Kate keeps it clean, and it's safe, and it's what I can afford right now." "Kate?" "The manager. She's been incredibly kind." Mira nodded approvingly. "Good. You need people looking out for you." She moved to the bed where Jackie was sleeping, her expression melting into the smile she reserved for babies. "Look at him. He's gotten so big already." "He's healthy, happy. That's what matters." "And you? Are you healthy and happy?" Before Jessica could answer, there was a soft knock on the door. Through the thin wood, Brad's voice called, "Jessica." "I brought lunch if you're hungry." Mira's eyebrows shot up. "Who is that?" That's Brad, my neighbor." "Your neighbor who brings you lunch?" Jessica opened the door to find Brad standing there with a bag from what looked like an expensive deli, wearing khakis and a button-down shirt that probably cost more than Jessica's monthly grocery budget. His smile faltered when he saw Mira standing behind Jessica with her arms crossed and her most intimidating expression. "I'm sorry," he said immediately. "I didn't realize you had company. I'll just—" "No, it's fine," Jessica said quickly. "Brad, this is my friend Mira. Mira, this is Brad. He's been helping us." "Helping how?" Mira asked, her voice carefully neutral. Brad seemed to sense the undercurrent of suspicion. "I live next door. When Jackie was sick the other night, I gave them a ride to the hospital." "That's very neighborly of you," Mira said, and Jessica winced at the pointed emphasis on neighborly. "I should go," Brad said, setting the bag of food on Jessica's table. "Nice to meet you, Mira." After he left, Mira turned to Jessica with raised eyebrows. "Okay, spill." Everything. Now. Jessica told her the whole story. Billy's abandonment, losing the apartment, ending up at the motel, Jackie's fever, Brad's kindness. She left out the part about her growing feelings, but she had a sinking suspicion that Mira could read between the lines. So this rich white boy just happened to be in the room next door when you needed help? Mira asked when Jessica finished. It's not like that. What's it like then? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like a vulnerable woman with a baby getting swept off her feet by a man with money and a savior complex. Brad's not like that, Jessica protested, but even as she said it, she could see how it looked from the outside. Jessica, honey, listen to yourself. You've known this man for 5 days, and you're already defending him like you're in love with him. The words hit too close to home, and Jessica felt her cheeks burn. I'm not. Oh my God, you are. You're falling for him. Mira sat down heavily in one of the chairs. Jess, please tell me you're not that desperate. Desperate? You're homeless, broke, and alone with a newborn baby. Enter the handsome stranger with money and a fancy car, playing knight in shining armor. It's like something out of a romance novel, but this is real life. You don't know him, Jessica said, anger beginning to simmer in her chest. And neither do you. That's my point. What do you actually know about this guy? His last name? Where he works? Why he's living in a motel instead of whatever mansion he obviously belongs in? Jessica opened her mouth to respond, then closed it. She realized with growing unease that she really didn't know much about Brad beyond what he'd told her, and people could lie. His wife left him, she said weakly. Says who? Him? Mira leaned forward. Jessica, I see this all the time in my work. Women in vulnerable situations who get involved with men who seem like salvation but turn out to be predators. Brad's not a predator. How do you know? Because he bought you groceries. Because he paid some hospital bills. Honey, that's exactly how predators work. They find women who are desperate and they love bomb them until those women are so grateful they'll do anything. Jessica felt sick. Was that what was happening? Had she been so desperate for kindness that she'd mistaken manipulation for genuine feeling? I need you to promise me something, Mira said, reaching for Jessica's hands. Promise me you'll be careful, that you won't make any big decisions about this guy until you know more about who he really is. Before Jessica could answer, Jackie woke up with a cry that quickly escalated to full-scale distress. Jessica picked him up, but he was clearly hungry and angry about it. I need to feed him, she said. Go ahead, I'll make myself some coffee. Jessica settled into the chair by the window to nurse Jackie, but he was fussy and wouldn't latch properly. Her stress was affecting her milk supply, and Jackie's frustration was mounting. Come on, baby, she murmured, trying again. Please just eat. But Jackie continued to cry, arching his back and refusing to nurse. Jessica felt tears of frustration start to flow. He's not usually like this, she said to Mira. Something's wrong. Maybe he's picking up on your stress. Babies are sensitive to their mother's emotions. That made Jessica feel even worse. Not only was she a potentially naive fool who'd fallen for the first man to show her kindness, but now her poor judgment was affecting her ability to care for her son. There was another knock on the door, and Brad's voice came through again. Jessica, is everything okay? I can hear Jackie crying. We're fine, Jessica called, but her voice was shaky. The door opened anyway. She'd forgotten to lock it, and Brad stepped inside, taking in the scene. Jessica crying while trying to calm a screaming baby, Mira watching with disapproving eyes. What can I do? Brad asked, and the simple offer broke something in Jessica's chest. Nothing, Mira said firmly. This is family business. But Brad ignored her, moving to Jessica's side. May I? He asked, gesturing toward Jackie. Jessica handed him over, and almost immediately Jackie began to calm. Brad held him expertly now, having learned over the past few days, and began the gentle bouncing motion that Jackie loved. "Hey there, little man," Brad said softly. "What's all this fuss about?" Within minutes, Jackie was quiet, looking up at Brad with those trusting baby eyes. "How did you do that?" Jessica asked. "Sometimes babies just need a different pair of arms," Brad said. "Here, try nursing him now." This time, Jackie latched immediately and began eating contentedly. "Thank you," Jessica said quietly. "Always," Brad replied, and the simple word held so much promise that Jessica felt her heart skip. Mira watched this entire exchange with narrowed eyes. After Brad left again, she turned to Jessica with a look that was part concern and part anger. "That man just walked into your room without permission," she said. "I forgot to lock the door. He assumed he had the right to enter. He assumed he had the right to handle your baby without being asked. Those are red flags, Jessica." "He was trying to help." "Maybe. Or maybe he was establishing dominance, showing me that he has more influence over your baby than I do, more access to your life than your oldest friend." Jessica felt confusion and doubt swirl in her stomach. "You're reading too much into it." "Am I? Or are you not reading enough into it because you're too grateful to think clearly?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Jessica looked down at Jackie, who was nursing peacefully now, completely content. Was she being naive? Was her judgment compromised by desperation and loneliness? "I want you to do something for me," Mira said. "I want you to find out who this guy really is, his full name, where he works, whether he's actually divorced or just separated or lying completely. Can you do that? Mira, can you do that? For Jackie's sake, if not for your own." Jessica met her friend's eyes and saw genuine fear there. Mira wasn't trying to ruin her happiness. She was trying to protect her. "Okay," Jessica said finally. "I'll find out more about him." "Good. And until you do, please be careful. Don't let him get too close. Don't let him make himself indispensable. Keep your guard up." After Mira left, Jessica sat in the growing darkness of her motel room, holding Jackie and feeling more confused than ever. Everything Mira had said made logical sense, but it also felt wrong in ways she couldn't articulate. Brad had never made her feel pressured or obligated. He'd never asked for anything in return for his help. When he looked at her, she didn't see calculation or manipulation. She saw genuine care, real affection. But then again, if she was that easy to fool, would she even recognize manipulation when she saw it? That night, as she heard Brad moving around in the room next door, Jessica made a decision. She would find out who Bradford Halfin really was. She owed it to Jackie and to herself to know the truth. She just hoped the truth wouldn't destroy the first good thing that had happened to her since Jackie was born. Chapter 6. Secrets in the Shadows. The Google search results for Bradford Halfin, Washington, D.C. struck Jessica like lightning, illuminating everything while burning her world to the ground. She stared at her phone screen in the dim motel room while Jackie slept peacefully beside her. The first result was a Washington Post business article from 6 months ago featuring a photo that was unmistakably Brad, though he appeared transformed, polished, powerful, wearing a suit that likely cost more than her car. Real estate mogul Bradford Halfin III closes $50 million mixed-use development deal, the headline read. $50 million. Jessica's hands trembled as she scrolled through article after article. Brad wasn't just wealthy, he was Washington elite wealthy. His company, Halfin Development, had been behind some of the biggest urban renewal projects in the D.C. area. His personal net worth was estimated in the hundreds of millions. The photos showed him at charity galas, political fundraisers, society events, always with the same woman, a stunning blonde with sharp cheekbones and the kind of smile that never reached her eyes. Donna Hebe Halfon, according to the captions. Public relations executive, philanthropist, socialite. Jessica found their wedding announcement from 5 years ago in the Post's style section. The write-up read like something from a fairy tale, two prominent D.C. families joining together, a reception at the Kennedy Center, a honeymoon in the Maldives. The bride's dress was Vera Wang. The flowers alone probably cost more than Jessica made in a year. But it was the most recent article that made her blood run cold. It was dated just 5 days ago, and the headline read, "Power couple Halfon Hebe announce separation." The article was brief but devastating. Real estate developer Bradford Halfon III and public relations executive Donna Hebe Halfon have announced their intention to divorce after 5 years of marriage. The couple cited irreconcilable differences. Mrs. Halfon will retain her maiden name for professional purposes. Both parties declined to comment further. 5 days ago, Brad had been separated from his wife for exactly 5 days when he'd moved into the motel room next to hers. Jessica's mind raced as she processed this information. Everything he'd told her was true, but the scale of it was so much bigger than she'd imagined. He wasn't just some successful businessman going through a divorce. He was Washington royalty slumming it in a cheap motel for reasons she couldn't begin to understand. Why would a man worth hundreds of millions of dollars stay in a place like the Sunset Motel? Why would he care about helping a broke single mother and her baby? What could she possibly offer someone who could afford anything he wanted? The doubts Mira had planted grew into full-blown paranoia. Was this some kind of game for him? Was she entertainment, a distraction from his real life? When he got bored or when his divorce was finalized, would he disappear back to his penthouse and leave her with a broken heart and false hopes? Jessica was so lost in her spiraling thoughts that she almost missed the sound of footsteps outside her door, heavy, unsteady footsteps that stopped right outside her room. Jessica! The voice was slurred, angry, and heartbreakingly familiar. Jessica, I know you're in there. Billy. Jessica's blood turned to ice. She grabbed her phone and silently moved to the window, peering through the curtain. Billy was standing in the parking lot, swaying slightly, clearly drunk. He was pounding on her door with one fist and holding what looked like a bottle in the other. "Open the door, Jess. I want to see my son." Jackie stirred at the sound but didn't wake fully. Jessica held her breath, hoping Billy would give up and leave. "I know you're in there," Billy shouted louder. "Kate told me which room. You can't keep my kid from me." Jessica's heart sank. Kate would never willingly give out that information, which meant Billy had either tricked her or threatened her. Either way, Jessica's safe haven had been compromised. "Jessica, I'm not leaving until you open this door." More pounding, loud enough that Jackie woke with a startled cry. Jessica quickly picked him up, trying to soothe him while her mind raced through options. She could call the police, but Billy wasn't technically doing anything illegal yet. She could try to sneak out the back, but there was no back exit from the motel rooms. "That's right, wake him up." Billy's voice was getting more aggressive. "Wake up my son so he can see his daddy." Jessica heard another door open, and Brad's voice cut through the night air. "Excuse me, it's pretty late for this kind of noise." "Who the hell are you?" Billy demanded. "I'm the neighbor who's trying to sleep. Maybe you could take this somewhere else." Jessica pressed her face to the window, watching the confrontation unfold. Brad had positioned himself between Billy and her door, and even though he was shorter and lighter than Billy, there was something in his stance that spoke of absolute confidence. "This is family business," Billy slurred. "My wife and kid are in there." "Ex-wife," Brad corrected calmly. "And if she wanted to talk to you, I imagine she would have opened the door by now." "You don't know anything about it, rich boy." Jessica saw Billy notice Brad's expensive clothes, saw the calculation in his eyes. Billy had always been good at reading people's social status and adjusting his behavior accordingly. Usually, he became more deferential around obviously wealthy people. Tonight, drunk and angry, he seemed to be going in the opposite direction. "I know enough," Brad said. "I know it's 2 in the morning and you're drunk and you're frightening a woman and a baby. That woman is my wife and that baby is my son, and I got rights." "You have the right to file appropriate legal paperwork through the court system," Brad said, with the kind of precise diction that suggested he'd dealt with legal matters before. "You don't have the right to show up drunk and pound on doors in the middle of the night." Billy stepped closer to Brad, using his height advantage to try to intimidate. "You sleeping with my wife, rich boy? That why you're so interested in protecting her?" Jessica saw Brad's jaw tighten, but his voice remained level. "I think you should leave. I think you should mind your own business." "She is my business." The words hit Jessica like a physical blow. The possessiveness in Brad's voice, the casual way he'd claimed ownership over her situation, it was exactly what Mira had warned her about. "Oh, I see how it is," Billy said with a nasty laugh. "You found yourself a nice little charity case. Poor black girl with a baby, probably real grateful for whatever you're willing to throw her way." "Stop talking," Brad said, and for the first time there was real danger in his voice. "Truth hurt? You like playing savior to the poor folks? Makes you feel like a big man?" Jessica saw Brad's hands clench into fists, saw him take a step forward that made Billy instinctively step back despite his size advantage. "I'm going to say this once," Brad said quietly. "Leave. Now, don't come back. If you want to see your son, do it through lawyers and courts like a civilized human being." "You threatening me?" "I'm educating you. This motel has security cameras. You're drunk, you're on private property, and you're harassing the tenants. One phone call brings the police, and I guarantee you don't want to explain to a family court judge why you were arrested for drunk and disorderly conduct outside your infant son's bedroom." Billy wavered, clearly trying to process this through his alcohol-clouded brain. Jessica could see him weighing his options, calculating whether his anger was worth the potential legal consequences. "This ain't over," he finally said, but he was already backing toward his car. "Yes, it is," Brad replied. "It's been over since you walked out on your family." After Billy drove away, weaving slightly as he pulled out of the parking lot, Brad stood outside Jessica's door for a long moment. "Jessica," he called softly. "Are you okay?" Jessica opened the door, still holding Jackie, her hands shaking with residual adrenaline. "Thank you," she said. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't." "Are you hurt? Did he hurt you?" "No, he never came inside, but he was so angry and drunk, and I was scared." Brad stepped closer, and Jessica caught a whiff of his cologne, expensive, subtle, the kind of scent that probably came from a bottle that cost more than her rent. "He won't be back tonight," Brad said. "But Jessica, you need to get a restraining order. Tomorrow. This can't happen again." "I know, I don't have money for a lawyer, and I don't know how the legal system works, and I'll help you. I know lawyers. Good ones." And there it was again. The easy assumption that his money could solve her problems, the casual offer of expensive help. Jessica thought about the Google search results, about the society photos, about Mira's warnings. "Why?" she asked suddenly. "Why what? Why are you helping me? Why do you care what happens to me and Jackie?" Brad seemed taken aback by the directness of the question. "I told you. I care about you both." "But why?" "I looked you up, Brad. I know who you are. You're worth hundreds of millions of dollars. You could be staying anywhere, doing anything. Why are you in this motel? Why are you interested in a broke single mother you met 5 days ago?" She watched his face carefully, looking for any sign of deception or calculation. Instead, she saw something that looked like pain. "You looked me up," he said quietly. "I had to. My friend made me realize I don't actually know anything about you." "And what did you find?" "That you're way more successful than you let on. That your divorce was announced in the Washington Post. That you move in circles I can't even imagine." Brad was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. "And now you think I'm what? Playing games with you? Amusing myself? I don't know what to think. Why would someone like you want anything to do with someone like me?" "Someone like you," Brad repeated, his voice getting harder. "What does that mean, exactly?" "You know what it means. I have nothing to offer you. Nothing you can't get somewhere else better, from people in your own social class." "Is that really what you think? That I'm here because I'm bored or because I get some kind of thrill from helping poor people?" "I don't know," Jessica said, and she hated how small her voice sounded. "Maybe." Brad stared at her for a long moment, and Jessica saw something die in his eyes. "I see," he said finally. "Well, thank you for your honesty." He turned to go back to his room, and Jessica felt panic rise in her throat. "Brad, wait. No, it's fine. You're probably right to be suspicious. I'm sure your friend gave you excellent advice about men like me. That's not— Good night, Jessica. Lock your door." He went into his room and closed the door firmly behind him, leaving Jessica standing alone in the parking lot with Jackie in her arms and the taste of regret bitter in her mouth. She'd wanted the truth, and now she had it. Brad was exactly who the Google search said he was: wealthy, powerful, connected. The question was whether that made him dangerous or just hopelessly out of her league. As she locked her door and settled Jackie back into his makeshift crib, Jessica realized that knowing Brad's net worth hadn't answered any of the questions that actually mattered. She still didn't know why he was here, why he cared, or whether his feelings for her were real. All she knew was that pushing him away had felt like tearing something vital out of her chest, and the silence from room 25 was deafening. Chapter 7. Hearts Don't Lie, Even When We Do. For 3 days, the silence from room 25 was so absolute that Jessica began to wonder if Brad had vanished back to his real life, leaving her with nothing but Google search results and the ghost of his wounded expression. She hadn't glimpsed him once since their confrontation in the parking lot. No coffee mysteriously appeared at her door, no groceries materialized, no gentle knock when Jackie was restless. It was as if Brad Halfin had never existed, except for the black Mercedes that remained parked outside his room like an expensive monument to what she'd destroyed. Jessica told herself this was for the best. Mira had been right. She was too vulnerable, too grateful, too ready to mistake charity for genuine feeling. A man with Brad's resources didn't need her for anything real. When the novelty wore off, when his divorce was finalized and his life returned to normal, he would have moved on anyway. But as she walked Jackie around the parking lot at 2 a.m. because he was teething and miserable, she found herself staring at Brad's dark window and wondering if she'd made the biggest mistake of her life. On Thursday morning, Kate knocked on her door with a thermos of coffee and a knowing look. "Honey, you and that man need to stop acting like children and talk to each other," she said without preamble. "I don't know what you mean," Jessica lied. "Child, I've been managing this place for 15 years. I know the sound of two people being miserable in rooms next to each other. Whatever happened between you two, fix it." "It's complicated, Kate. Love always is. But that man hasn't left his room except to go get food, and you've been crying when you think nobody can hear. Meanwhile, that beautiful baby is picking up on all this tension." Jessica glanced at Jackie, who was indeed more fussy than usual, as if he could sense the emotional turmoil around him. "He's too good for me," Jessica said quietly. "He's rich, Kate. Really rich. I looked him up online." Kate snorted. "Honey, I knew that boy had money the minute he walked in here. You think I don't know a $50,000 watch when I see one? 50,000? Jessica's voice squeaked. At least. But you know what I also see. I see a man who talks to you like you hung the moon. I see someone who holds that baby like he's made of gold. I see a person who's been happier in the past week than he probably has been in years. But the difference between us, the only difference between you and him is the size of your bank accounts. And honey, that's just numbers on paper. What matters is what's in here. Kate tapped her chest over her heart. Don't let fear ruin something beautiful. After Kate left, Jessica spent the day wrestling with doubt and longing in equal measure. Every sound from next door made her heart race, hoping Brad might reach out. But the silence stretched on, and by evening she felt hollowed out with regret. That's when the rain started. It began as a gentle patter around dinner time, but escalated quickly into a full-blown storm. By 8 o'clock, thunder was shaking the windows and lightning was turning the parking lot into a disco of shadows. Jackie, who was already cranky from teething, became inconsolable. Jessica tried everything, feeding him, walking him, singing to him, giving him teething toys. But the combination of his discomfort and the loud storm had him in full meltdown mode. His cries were piercing, desperate, the kind that made Jessica feel like she was failing as a mother. "Please, baby," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Mama doesn't know what else to do." She was walking him around the small room for the 100th time when a particularly loud clap of thunder made Jackie's screams reach a new level of distress. Through her own tears and exhaustion, Jessica heard something that made her freeze. Piano music, soft, gentle, barely audible over the storm and Jackie's crying, but unmistakably coming from room 25. Someone was playing piano and the melody was hauntingly beautiful. A lullaby she didn't recognize, but that seemed to speak directly to her fractured heart. Jessica moved closer to the wall, still holding the screaming Jackie, and pressed her ear against it. The music was clearer here, and she realized Brad must have some kind of electronic keyboard in his room. The melody was complex but soothing, the kind of thing that spoke of years of training and genuine talent. Almost miraculously, Jackie's cries began to quiet. Not stop entirely, but fade to sniffles and hiccups, as if he too was listening to the music. "You hear that, baby?" Jessica whispered. "Someone's playing just for you." The lullaby continued for nearly 10 minutes, gentle and repetitive, and incredibly beautiful. By the time it ended, Jackie was asleep in Jessica's arms, finally peaceful. Jessica stood by the wall for a long time after the music stopped, holding her sleeping son and feeling something break open in her chest. Brad was still there, still caring enough to play lullabies through the wall when he heard Jackie crying, still trying to help even though she'd accused him of having ulterior motives. Before she could lose her courage, Jessica settled Jackie in his crib and knocked softly on Brad's door. "Brad," she called quietly, "I know you're there." Silence. The music was beautiful. Jackie loved it. More silence, but Jessica thought she heard movement inside. "I owe you an apology," she said to the closed door. "I was scared, and I lashed out, and I said things I didn't mean." Still nothing. "Please," Jessica said, her voice breaking. "I know I hurt you, but I need to explain." After what felt like an eternity, the door opened. Brad stood there in jeans and a t-shirt, his hair messed up like he'd been running his hands through it. He looked tired, guarded, nothing like the open, warm man she'd come to know. "What do you want, Jessica?" "To apologize, to explain, to Dot." She took a shaky breath. "To tell you the truth." Brad studied her face for a moment, then stepped aside to let her into his room. The space was identical to hers, but felt completely different. There was indeed a small electronic keyboard set up on the table, along with a laptop and stacks of papers. The bed was unmade, and there were empty takeout containers that suggested he'd been living on delivered food for days. "You play piano," Jessica said, "since I was 5. My mother insisted on lessons. It was beautiful. You calmed Jackie when I couldn't." Brad shrugged. "I heard him crying. I thought it might help." Jessica felt fresh tears threaten. Even when he was angry with her, even when she'd hurt him, he'd still tried to help her son. "Brad, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for what I said, for how I acted." "Which part are you sorry for? Looking me up, finding out who I really am, or deciding that my bank account makes me untrustworthy?" "I'm sorry for being afraid," Jessica said quietly. "I'm sorry for letting other people's voices matter more than my own instincts. Your friend was just looking out for you." "She was, but she doesn't know you, and I—" Jessica struggled to find the words. "I was scared because what we have feels too good to be real. I was scared because I'm falling in love with you, and that terrifies me." Brad went very still. "What did you say?" "I said I'm falling in love with you," Jessica repeated, her voice stronger now. "I'm falling in love with a man who plays lullabies for my son through motel walls, who drives us to the hospital at 2 in the morning without being asked, who steps between my drunk ex-husband and my door like it's the most natural thing in the world. Jessica, I'm falling in love with someone who holds Jackie like he's precious, who makes me feel like I'm not doing this alone anymore, who looks at me like I'm beautiful, even when I'm exhausted and scared and have nothing to offer." "You have everything to offer," Brad said fiercely. "Do I? Because when I found out who you really are, all I could think was that I'm nothing compared to your real life. I'm a broke single mother living in a motel. You're Washington elite. You belong to a world I can't even imagine." "That world is bullshit," Brad said with more vehemence than she'd ever heard from him. "That world is full of people like Donna, who measure everything by status and money, and who's wearing what designer dress to which charity gala. That world is why I didn't know what real love looked like until I heard you singing to your son." Jessica stared at him. "What? Do you want to know why I'm really here, Jessica? Why I've been hiding in this motel instead of fighting for my company or my penthouse or any of the things that used to matter to me?" She nodded. "Because when I found Donna with Marcus, when my marriage exploded and my business partnership imploded and my entire life fell apart, I realized I had no idea who I was underneath all the money and status. I realized I'd built my entire identity around things that could be taken away." Brad moved to the window, looking out at the storm. "I came here because I needed to figure out who Bradford Halfin is when you strip away the net worth and the real estate empire and the social connections. And then I met you. Brad, you want to know what you have to offer." He turned back to her, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "You have authenticity. You have the kind of love that would walk to a hospital at 2 in the morning if it meant helping your child. You have strength I've never seen before, the strength to start over with nothing, to trust a stranger, to keep going when everything falls apart. That's not special. That's just survival." "No, it's not. It's grace under pressure. It's choosing hope when you have every reason to despair. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever witnessed." Jessica felt tears spill over. "I was so scared you were just playing games, that I was some kind of charity project. And I was scared you'd figure out that I need you more than you need me," Brad admitted. "That without you and Jackie, I'm just a rich guy with daddy issues and a failed marriage. That's not true, isn't it? Jessica, you've shown me what real love looks like, what family looks like, what actually matters. Before I met you, I thought success was about building bigger buildings and making more money. Now I know it's about coming home to someone who's genuinely happy to see you." The rain was still pounding against the windows, but inside the room, everything felt still and charged with possibility. "Where does this leave us?" Jessica asked quietly. "I don't know," Brad admitted. "I know I love you. I know I love Jackie. I know I want to build something real with you, something that has nothing to do with money or status or what anyone else thinks. Even though we're from completely different worlds. We're not from different worlds. We're both from the world of people who've been hurt and are trying to figure out how to trust again. Everything else is just details." Jessica looked at this man who'd had every material advantage in life, but had still ended up broken and alone in a motel room, just like her. She thought about Mira's warnings, about the very real challenges their different backgrounds would create. But she also thought about the way Brad looked at Jackie, the way he'd played lullabies through the wall, the way he'd stood up to Billy without being asked. "I love you too," she said quietly. Brad crossed the room in 2 strides and cupped her face in his hands. "Are you sure? Because once we do this, once we try to build something together, I'm all in. I don't want to be your safety net or your financial solution. I want to be your partner." "What does that look like?" "I don't know. We figure it out as we go. But Jessica," his thumb traced along her cheekbone, "I want forever with you. I want to adopt Jackie officially. I want to have more children together. I want to wake up next to you when we're 60 and still feel like the luckiest man alive. That's a big leap from a week in a motel. Sometimes love doesn't follow a reasonable timeline." Jessica searched his face and saw nothing but sincerity. No calculation, no hidden agenda, just a man who'd been as broken as she was and had somehow found healing in their impossible connection. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, let's figure it out as we go." When Brad kissed her, it was like coming home to a place she'd never been but had always been searching for. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside, wrapped in each other's arms, Jessica finally understood what it meant to choose love over fear. They were going to be okay. More than okay. They were going to be extraordinary. Chapter 8. The Courage to Fall. Jessica woke in Brad's arms for the first time to the sound of someone hammering on the motel office door, like they intended to break it down. For a disorienting moment, she was confused by the unfamiliar room, by the weight of Brad's arm around her waist, by the lingering scent of his cologne on the pillow beneath her cheek. They talked until sunrise after their emotional reconciliation, finally falling asleep fully clothed above the covers, holding each other like anchors in a storm. The pounding continued, followed by muffled shouting. Jessica checked her phone. 8:30 a.m. Jackie was still sleeping peacefully in his portable crib, which they'd moved to Brad's room sometime during the night. "What the hell?" Brad mumbled, sitting up and running a hand through his disheveled hair. Through the thin walls, they could hear Kate's voice, calm but firm. "Sir, I need you to lower your voice. You're disturbing the other guests." "I don't give a damn about the other guests. I want to know which room my wife is in." "Billy." Jessica's blood turned to ice. "Sir, I cannot give out information about our guests. If you'd like to contact someone staying here, you're welcome to call them yourself." "Look, lady, I know she's here. I saw her car in the parking lot. Room 24, right? That's where she is." Jessica was already out of bed, moving toward the window to peer through the curtain. Billy was standing outside the motel office, but he wasn't alone. There was another man with him, older, wearing a cheap suit and carrying a briefcase. Behind them was a woman Jessica didn't recognize, taking notes on a clipboard. "Brad," Jessica whispered urgently. "There are 3 of them. Billy brought people with him." Brad was beside her in an instant, looking over her shoulder. His expression darkened when he saw the scene outside. "The man in the suit is probably a lawyer," he said grimly, "and the woman could be a social worker." A social worker? Why would Billy bring a social worker? Before Brad could answer, there was a sharp knock on their door. Jessica Horton? The voice was female, professional, unfamiliar. This is Patricia Wells from DC Child and Family Services. I need to speak with you regarding a custody concern that's been filed. Jessica felt the world tilt sideways. Custody concern. I have a court order here requiring a welfare check on the minor child, Jackie Kemp. Please open the door, Miss Horton. Jessica looked at Brad in panic. What do I do? Open the door, Brad said quietly. Running will only make things worse. But Jessica, let me do the talking. You can't. This isn't your... Yes, it is. We're together now, remember? What affects you affects me. Jessica's hands shook as she unlocked the door. The woman standing outside was middle-aged, wearing a gray pantsuit and the kind of expression that suggested she'd seen everything twice. Behind her, Billy stood with his arms crossed, looking smugly satisfied. Ms. Horton, I'm Patricia Wells, caseworker with DC Child and Family Services. The woman held up an official-looking badge. I need to conduct a welfare check on your son based on a report filed yesterday evening. What kind of report? Jessica managed to ask. Patricia consulted her clipboard. Ms. Horton, the report alleges that you're living in substandard conditions, that you've been cohabitating with unknown individuals, and that you may be engaging in prostitution to support yourself and your child. What? Jessica's voice cracked with shock and outrage. It's completely fabricated, Brad said smoothly, stepping beside Jessica. I'm Bradford Halfin, Jessica's partner. I'd be happy to address any questions you might have. Patricia's eyes widened slightly at Brad's appearance, his expensive clothes, his confident bearing, the unmistakable aura of wealth and education. And you are? She asked, making notes. As I said, Jessica's partner. I'm also a successful businessman and a character witness for both Jessica and Jackie's well-being. Billy stepped forward, his face twisted with anger. Partner? Jessica, you've been shacking up with some random guy you just met, and you want to tell me you're a fit mother? Mr. Kemp, Patricia said firmly, please let me handle this. Miss Horton, may I see the child? Jessica's protective instincts flared. He's sleeping. I don't want to wake him up. I'm afraid I need to see that he's safe and healthy. It will just take a moment. With no choice, Jessica led the small group into Brad's room. Jackie was indeed sleeping peacefully in his crib, his cheeks rosy with health, surrounded by clean blankets and expensive baby supplies that Brad had quietly accumulated over the past week. Patricia approached the crib and made notes as she observed Jackie. He appears well-nourished and clean. How old is he? 7 weeks, Jessica said, her voice barely steady. And his father is Mr. Kemp? Biologically, yes, but Billy abandoned us when Jackie was 3 weeks old. That's not true, Billy protested. I left temporarily because Jessica was being unreasonable about our financial situation. I've been trying to reconnect with my son ever since. By showing up drunk at 2 in the morning, Brad asked coolly. Patricia's head snapped up. Mr. Kemp appeared here intoxicated. 3 nights ago, Brad confirmed. I intervened when he became belligerent and was frightening Jessica and the baby. He's lying, Billy said quickly. I came here to see my son, and this guy threatened me. Rich boy thinks he can buy himself a ready-made family and push out the real father. That's enough, Patricia said sharply. She turned back to Jessica. Miss Horton, how long have you been residing at this motel? About a week and a half. And prior to that, Jessica felt her cheeks burn with shame. Billy cleaned out our apartment and our bank account. We were evicted. So you've been homeless? We've had safe, clean shelter, Brad interjected. I can provide character references, financial records. Whatever documentation you need to verify that Jessica and Jackie are being well cared for. Patricia studied Brad with undisguised curiosity. What is your relationship to this family, Mr. Halfon? I love them, Brad said simply, and I intend to marry Jessica and formally adopt Jackie when the time is right. The words hit Jessica like a lightning bolt. They'd talked about forever, but this was the first time Brad had said anything so concrete in front of other people. Billy exploded. Adopt my son? Over my dead body, I got rights. Actually, said the lawyer, who'd been silent until now, you may have fewer rights than you think, Mr. Kemp. Abandoning a minor child, especially an infant, is grounds for termination of parental rights in Washington, D.C. I didn't abandon him. I was trying to figure out our financial situation by taking all the money and leaving your wife and newborn son homeless. The lawyer, who Jessica now realized wasn't Billy's lawyer but someone else entirely, raised an eyebrow. That's an interesting interpretation of the word figuring. Patricia was watching this exchange with growing interest. I'm sorry, you are. Leo Morrison, family law attorney. I represent Mr. Halfon and, by extension, Ms. Horton and her son's interests. Jessica stared at Leo in shock. When had Brad called a lawyer? How had he arranged this? Leo continued smoothly. I have documentation here showing that Mr. Kemp removed all marital assets from the family's accounts approximately 4 weeks ago, leaving Ms. Horton with no financial resources while she was still recovering from childbirth. I also have witness statements regarding his intoxicated appearance at this location 3 nights ago. That's... Billy started, then stopped, clearly realizing he was out of his depth. Patricia looked between all the adults in the room, then back at the sleeping baby. Mr. Kemp, the report you filed suggests that you're concerned about your son's welfare. However, what I'm seeing is a healthy, well-cared-for infant in a clean, safe environment with a mother who is clearly devoted to him and a partner who appears to be providing additional support and stability. But they're living in a motel, Billy protested. Temporary housing is not child abuse, Patricia replied dryly. Abandoning your family and leaving them destitute, however, raises serious questions about your fitness as a parent. Jessica watched Billy's face cycle through anger, confusion, and growing panic as he realized his plan was backfiring spectacularly. Furthermore, Leo added, pulling documents from his briefcase, I have here a preliminary restraining order against Mr. Kemp, filed this morning, based on his harassment of Ms. Horton and threatening behavior toward the minor child. Threatening behavior? Billy sputtered. I never threatened anybody. Showing up intoxicated and demanding entry to a residence containing an infant could certainly be construed as threatening, Leo said calmly. Patricia was making extensive notes. Ms. Horton, do you feel that you and your son are safe and well cared for in your current situation? Jessica looked around the room, at Brad, who was watching her with love and support written all over his face, at Leo, who was clearly an expensive lawyer Brad had somehow retained on her behalf, at Jackie, sleeping peacefully despite all the drama swirling around him. Yes, she said firmly. We're safer and better cared for than we've ever been. And Mr. Halfon, you're prepared to take on the responsibility of helping to raise another man's child? He's not another man's child, Brad said, looking directly at Billy. He's the son of the woman I love, which makes him my son in every way that matters. Billy Kemp contributed genetic material. That doesn't make him a father. The room fell silent except for Jackie's soft breathing. Finally, Patricia closed her notebook. Mr. Kemp, based on my observation today, I see no evidence of neglect or abuse. Your son appears healthy and well cared for. Ms. Horton appears to be a devoted mother with adequate support systems in place. However, I will be scheduling a follow-up visit in 2 weeks to ensure continued stability. But, Billy started. Furthermore, Patricia continued, I will be recommending that you complete parenting classes and family counseling before any supervised visitation is considered. Your behavior pattern suggests you may need support in understanding appropriate parental conduct. Billy's face went red with rage. This is bullshit. You're all ganging up on me because he's got money. Mr. Kemp, Leo said pleasantly, I should mention that making false reports to child services is a criminal offense in Washington, D.C. Harassment and intimidation of a custodial parent is also actionable in civil court. I'd suggest you think very carefully about your next steps. Billy looked around the room, clearly realizing he was outmatched and outmaneuvered. This isn't over, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Yes, it is, Brad said quietly. It's been over since you walked out on your responsibilities. The only question now is whether you want to try to build a healthy relationship with your son, or whether you want to keep playing games that hurt everyone, including him. After Billy left, muttering threats under his breath, Patricia finished her paperwork while Leo and Brad spoke quietly near the window. Jackie woke up as the adults were leaving, looking around with bright, curious eyes, and immediately smiling when he saw Jessica. Well, hello there, handsome, Patricia said softly, and Jessica saw her professional mask slip for just a moment. You're a lucky little boy, you know that? You've got a mama who loves you very much. Miss Wells, Jessica said as Patricia was preparing to leave, what happens now? Now I file my report stating that there are no welfare concerns regarding your son. The case will be closed unless new evidence emerges. And Ms. Horton? Patricia smiled. For what it's worth, you're doing a good job. Being a single mother is hard enough without people trying to make it harder. After everyone left, Jessica sat on the bed holding Jackie, trying to process everything that had just happened. A lawyer, she said to Brad. When did you call a lawyer? Yesterday. After our conversation, I realized that Billy wasn't going to just disappear. I wanted to be prepared. And Leo just happened to be available this morning? Brad looked slightly embarrassed. Leo's been my lawyer for 5 years. He's used to my emergencies. Your emergencies probably usually involve contracts and real estate deals, not custody battles over other people's children. No, Brad agreed. They usually involve much less important things. Jessica studied his face. You told that social worker you wanted to adopt Jackie. I do, if you'll let me, if he'll have me. Brad, we've been together for less than 24 hours. Officially, I mean. I know it's fast, I know it's crazy, but Jessica, when I saw Billy trying to take him away from you, when I imagined that beautiful little boy growing up thinking his father didn't want him. Brad's voice broke slightly. I realized I'd do anything to protect both of you. Legal adoption papers would just make it official. Jessica looked down at Jackie, who was staring up at Brad with the kind of trust that babies only showed to people they considered safe. He already loves you, she said softly, and I love him. I love both of you, more than I've ever loved anything in my life. Even though this is all complicated and messy and probably going to get more complicated. Especially because of that, Brad said, sitting beside her on the bed. Easy things don't teach you what you're made of. Hard things do. And Jessica, what we're made of is pretty damn strong. As if to agree, Jackie reached up and grabbed Brad's finger with his tiny fist, holding on tight. I think that's a yes, Jessica said, laughing through the tears she hadn't realized were falling. To which part? All of it. The adoption, the marriage, the whole crazy, impossible, beautiful mess. When Brad kissed her, Jackie was still holding his finger, and Jessica thought this might be what perfect looked like. Not easy, not simple, but real and fierce and unbreakable. Chapter 9. When Tomorrow Calls Your Name. The woman standing in the motel office doorway was everything Jessica had never been. Tall, blonde, flawlessly composed, and unmistakably pregnant. Jessica froze mid-motion while feeding Jackie his bottle, watching through her window as the woman spoke to Kate with the kind of effortless authority that suggested she'd never been denied anything. Even from a distance, Jessica could see the expensive tailoring of her clothes, the designer handbag, the subtle gleam of jewelry that probably cost more than most people's annual salaries. This had to be Donna. "Brad," Jessica called softly, not taking her eyes off the scene unfolding outside. "You need to see this." Brad emerged from the tiny kitchenette where he'd been making coffee, took one look out the window, and went completely pale. "Shit," he breathed. "That's your ex-wife?" "That's Donna." Brad's voice was tight with tension. "And she's pregnant." Jessica felt her world tilt sideways. "Pregnant?" Before Brad could respond, there was a sharp knock on their door. Not the gentle tap Brad used or the friendly knock of Kate, but something imperious and demanding. "Bradford." Donna's voice was crisp, cultured, with the kind of accent that spoke of expensive private schools. "I know you're in there. We need to talk." Brad looked at Jessica with something like panic in his eyes. "I need to handle this." "We need to handle this," Jessica corrected, standing up with Jackie still in her arms. "I'm not hiding." "Jessica, you don't understand. Donna can be difficult." "I can hear you talking in there," Donna called through the door. "Really, Bradford, this is ridiculous. Open the door." Brad took a deep breath and opened it. Donna Heeb-Halfin was even more intimidating up close than she'd been in the society page photos. She was maybe Jessica's age, but carried herself with the kind of polish that came from a lifetime of privilege. Her pregnancy was subtle but unmistakable, probably about 4 months along, and she wore it like an accessory that completed her outfit. Her eyes swept over Brad, taking in his casual clothes and disheveled appearance, then moved to Jessica and Jackie with the kind of assessment that made Jessica feel like she was being priced and found wanting. "So this is where you've been hiding," Donna said, stepping into the room without being invited. "A motel? Really, Bradford? How bohemian of you. What do you want, Donna?" Brad's voice was carefully controlled. "What I want is for my husband to come home so we can discuss our future like civilized adults." Donna's hand moved to rest on her small bump. "Especially now that we're going to be parents." Jessica felt Jackie tense in her arms, as if he could sense the sudden tension in the room. She held him closer, trying to project calm, while her heart hammered against her ribs. "We're getting divorced, Donna. There is no future." "Actually, there is." Donna smiled, and it was predatory. "I'm pregnant, Bradford. With your child. Our child." "That's impossible." "Is it? You came home early from your Chicago trip in December. We made love that morning before you left for the office. Surely you remember." Jessica watched Brad's face carefully, saw the moment when memory clicked into place, saw the doubt creep into his eyes. "You were with Marcus that same day," he said, but his voice was less certain now. "In the afternoon, yes. But the morning was ours." Donna's smile widened. "I have medical records, Bradford, ultrasounds. The baby was conceived on December 15th, the morning you came home early because you missed me." Jessica felt sick. She didn't know the exact timeline of Brad's marriage breakdown, but if Donna was telling the truth— "Let me see the records," Brad said. "Of course." Donna pulled papers from her expensive handbag with the satisfied air of someone playing a winning hand. 16 weeks pregnant as of yesterday, conception date February 18th, plus or minus 3 days. I think you'll find that narrows it down quite considerably. Brad took the papers with shaking hands, and Jessica watched his face change as he read. The color drained from his cheeks, and when he looked up at her, she saw devastation in his eyes. "Bradford," Donna said gently, moving closer to him. "I know you're hurt. I know I made mistakes. But this changes everything, doesn't it? We're going to be parents. We can work through what happened between us for the sake of our child." "Your child," Jessica said quietly, and both Brad and Donna turned to look at her. She'd been so quiet they'd almost forgotten she was there. "Excuse me?" Donna's voice was arctic. "Your child? You just said it yourself. You were with Marcus the same day. How do you know which man is the father?" Donna's smile faltered for just a moment before reasserting itself. "Because I know my body. I know when I ovulated. And I know that what happened with Marcus was an aberration, a moment of weakness that I regret deeply." "But you don't know for certain," Jessica pressed. "Not without a paternity test." "A paternity test?" Donna laughed, but there was something forced about it. "Really, dear, that's rather crass, don't you think? Besides, Bradford knows he's the father. Don't you, darling?" Brad was staring at the ultrasound photos with an expression Jessica couldn't read. The timing fits. Of course it does." Donna moved to stand beside him, close enough that Jessica caught a whiff of her expensive perfume. "Bradford, I know I hurt you. I know I made terrible choices. But this baby is our chance to start over, to build the family we always talked about." "You never wanted children," Brad said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I was scared," Donna admitted, and for the first time she sounded genuinely vulnerable. "Scared of changing, scared of not being enough, scared of losing myself. But when I found out about the baby, when I realized what I'd thrown away—" She touched his arm. "I want this, Bradford. I want us. I want our family." Jessica watched this interaction, feeling like she was disappearing piece by piece. This was Brad's world. These beautiful, sophisticated people with their complicated histories and shared past. What was she compared to this? What could she offer that could compete with the mother of his child? "Jessica," Brad said suddenly, as if reading her thoughts, "this doesn't change—" "Yes, it does," Jessica interrupted quietly. "Of course it does." "Who is this exactly?" Donna asked, looking at Jessica with the kind of polite interest one might show to a piece of furniture. "This is Jessica," Brad said. "And Jackie. I told you I'm with them now." "You're with them." Donna's tone made it sound like she was discussing Brad's choice of breakfast cereal. "How nice. But Bradford, surely you understand that this situation has changed now. You can't abandon your own child for someone else's." The words hit Jessica like physical blows. "I should go," she said, starting toward the door. "No." Brad caught her arm. "Don't go." "Bradford," Donna said, her voice taking on a harder edge, "be realistic. You're a respected businessman, a pillar of the community. What do you think people will say when they find out you left your pregnant wife for—" She looked Jessica up and down with undisguised disdain. "For this?" "Stop," Brad said sharply. "I'm just being practical, darling. You have responsibilities now. Real responsibilities. To your real family." Jessica pulled free of Brad's grip. "She's right," she said quietly. "You have a baby coming, Brad. Your baby. You can't walk away from that." "I'm not walking away from anything. We'll figure this out." "How?" Jessica's voice broke slightly. "How do we figure out you having a baby with another woman? How do we figure out you being tied to her for the rest of your life? We find a way." But Jessica could see the uncertainty in his eyes, could see him already being pulled back into Donna's orbit by the gravity of shared responsibility and social expectation. "No," she said softly, "we don't. Because you're not the kind of man who abandons his child, and I'm not the kind of woman who asks you to." "Jessica, please." "I love you enough to let you go," Jessica said, tears flowing freely now. "I love you enough to not make you choose between me and your baby." "How noble," Donna said, but there was triumph in her voice. Jessica walked to the door, then turned back. But Brad, when that baby is born, you get a paternity test, because if she's lying, if that baby isn't yours, I'll never forgive you for throwing us away for nothing. She left before Brad could respond, clutching Jackie to her chest and walking blindly toward her own room. Behind her, she could hear Donna's voice, smooth and reasonable, already weaving the web that would pull Brad back into the life he'd tried to leave behind. In her room, Jessica set Jackie in his crib and sat on the bed, trying to breathe through the pain that felt like it might actually kill her. She'd known this was too good to be true. She'd known that men like Brad didn't end up with women like her, not in real life. Through the thin walls, she could hear the low murmur of voices from Brad's room. She couldn't make out words, but she could hear the tone, Donna's persuasive, Brad's conflicted. The conversation went on for over an hour. When silence finally fell, Jessica expected to hear Donna's car starting, to see her drive away. Instead, she heard the door to room 25 close. Then nothing. Jessica waited, hoping for a knock on her door, hoping Brad would come to explain, to fight for what they'd built together. But as the hours passed and darkness fell, the silence stretched on. It wasn't until she saw the light go on in room 25, much later that evening, two silhouettes moving behind the curtains instead of one, that Jessica understood. Donna wasn't leaving, and maybe Brad wasn't either. Jessica spent that night staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the couple next door, rebuilding their life together, while Jackie slept peacefully beside her, unaware that the only father figure he'd ever known was slipping away from them, one quiet conversation at a time. By morning, Jessica had made her decision. She couldn't stay here and watch Brad choose his real family over the pretend one they'd built in this temporary place. She couldn't sit in this room listening to them plan their future while hers crumbled. Kate found her packing the few belongings she and Jackie owned. "Honey, what are you doing?" "Leaving," Jessica said simply. "It's time." "What about your young man?" "He's not my young man anymore. He's going to be a father. With his wife." Kate was quiet for a moment. "You sure about that?" "I'm sure that he has responsibilities now that don't include me and Jackie. I'm sure that I can't sit here watching him choose between us and losing every time." "Sometimes the right choice takes a little longer to see clearly," Kate said gently. "And sometimes the right choice is the hardest one," Jessica replied. "I won't be the woman who stands between a man and his child. I won't be the reason a baby grows up without their father." As Jessica loaded her car, she could see movement in room 25, but Brad never came outside. Part of her hoped he would, hoped he'd fight for what they'd had. But a larger part of her knew that if he let her go without a word, then Donna had already won. Jessica drove away from the Sunset Motel with Jackie sleeping in his car seat, not knowing where they were going, but knowing they couldn't stay. In her rearview mirror, she watched the place where she'd fallen in love disappear and tried to convince herself that leaving was an act of strength rather than surrender. She just hoped that someday, when Brad was changing his baby's diapers and teaching his child to ride a bike, he'd remember that once upon a time in a rundown motel, he'd been loved completely by a woman who'd asked for nothing but his heart. And maybe, if she was very lucky, he'd remember that he'd loved her back. Chapter 10. Love Writes Its Own Forever. 3 days after Jessica vanished from the Sunset Motel, Brad discovered that the woman carrying what he'd believed was his child had been orchestrating an elaborate deception from the moment she'd walked back into his life. He sat in Leo's office, staring at medical records that made his blood freeze, while his lawyer explained in precise legal terms how completely he'd been manipulated. "The ultrasound images are authentic," Leo said, spreading the documents across his mahogany desk. "But they don't belong to Donna. We had our investigator verify the patient ID numbers. They belong to a woman named Sarah Chen." Donna apparently told Sarah she needed them for a harmless prank on an ex-boyfriend. A harmless prank, Brad repeated, his voice hollow. The pregnancy test results are equally fabricated. Our lab analysis confirmed they were doctored. Donna was never pregnant, Brad. The entire scenario was an elaborate fraud designed to manipulate you into reconciling. Brad thought about the past 3 days, the most miserable 72 hours of his life. Donna had moved into his motel room and immediately begun planning their reconciliation, and all he'd been able to think about was Jessica. "There's more," Leo said grimly. "Billy Kemp filed an emergency custody petition yesterday. He's claiming Jessica abandoned Jackie and is seeking immediate temporary custody." Brad's blood turned to ice. "Where is Jackie now?" "With Billy, as of yesterday morning. He filed the emergency petition and got a temporary hearing within 24 hours by claiming the child was in immediate danger." Brad was on his feet before Leo finished speaking. "We have to find Jessica. We have to fix this." "Brad, I've been trying to locate her since she left. She's not using her credit cards. Her phone goes straight to voicemail, and Kate swears she doesn't know where Jessica went. Find her, Leo. Whatever it costs, whatever it takes. Find her." Jessica was working her third shift at the all-night diner in Arlington when the news came on the television mounted in the corner. She'd been there for 2 days now, sleeping in her car between shifts, trying to save enough for a security deposit while staying far enough from D.C. to avoid running into Brad or Donna. But when she heard Jackie's name, her head snapped up so fast she nearly dropped the coffee pot she was carrying. Emergency custody hearing for 6-week-old Jackie Kemp continues today as the child's mother remains missing. The father, Billy Kemp, was granted temporary custody yesterday after claiming the mother abandoned the child. The coffee pot slipped from Jessica's numb fingers, shattering on the floor. "My baby," Jessica whispered. "They took my baby." She was running before she'd consciously decided to move, tearing off her apron and grabbing her purse. Billy had Jackie. Jessica drove to the courthouse on fumes and fury. She had $17 in her wallet, no lawyer, and no plan beyond getting her baby back. She was surprised to find Leo Morrison waiting for her in the courthouse lobby. "Jessica, thank God," he said, standing as she approached. "We've been looking for you everywhere." "Where's Jackie?" "Where's my son?" "Upstairs in family court. The hearing started 20 minutes ago, but I managed to get a continuance when I saw you walking in. Brad's been going out of his mind trying to find you." "Brad?" Jessica's heart clenched. "What about his baby? What about Donna?" Leo's expression was grim. "There is no baby. Donna was lying about everything. The pregnancy, the ultrasounds, all of it. Brad's been trying to find you for 3 days to tell you the truth." Leo's expression was grim. "There is no baby. Donna was lying about everything. The pregnancy, the ultrasounds, all of it. Brad's been trying to find you for 3 days to tell you the truth." The family courtroom was small and filled with people Jessica didn't recognize. Billy sat at one table with a lawyer. At the other table, Brad sat alone, looking haggard and desperate. When Jessica walked in, Brad's head snapped up, and their eyes met across the room. The relief and love in his expression nearly brought her to her knees. "All rise," the bailiff called. "The Honorable Judge Patricia Williams, presiding." Judge Williams was a stern-looking black woman in her 50s who surveyed the courtroom with no patience for games. "Mr. Kemp," she said, consulting her notes, "you're seeking emergency custody of your 6-week-old son based on claims that the mother abandoned the child. I see that Miss Horton has now appeared. Counselor." Billy's lawyer stood up. "Your Honor, Mr. Kemp maintains that Ms. Horton abandoned the child with an unrelated man and disappeared for several days." "I didn't abandon anyone," Jessica said, standing up. I left my son with someone I trusted because I thought it was best for him. Miss Horton, you'll need to be sworn in if you're going to testify. But first, I'd like to understand the current situation. Who currently has physical custody of the child? I do, Your Honor, Billy said smugly. As his father, I took emergency custody when it became clear that Jessica was unable to care for him properly. And where is the child now? Billy hesitated. He's with my girlfriend. I had to work today, so she's watching him. Your girlfriend, Judge Williams repeated flatly. Not the child's mother, not a family member, but your girlfriend. Leo stood up. Your Honor, if I may. I have documentation showing that Mr. Kemp removed all marital assets approximately 6 weeks ago, leaving Ms. Horton with no financial resources while she was recovering from childbirth. Furthermore, Your Honor, Mr. Kemp made no attempt to see his son for nearly a month after abandoning the family. Judge Williams turned to Jessica. Miss Horton, please explain your absence from the child for the past several days. Your Honor, I believed that Mr. Halfin was going to have a child with his ex-wife. I didn't want to be the reason a father couldn't be with his child, so I left to give them space. And the child was with Mr. Halfin during this time? Yes, ma'am. Brad, Mr. Halfin, loves Jackie. He's been more of a father to my son in 2 weeks than Billy has been in 6 weeks. Judge Williams looked at Brad. Mr. Halfin, what is your relationship to this family? Brad stood up. Your Honor, I love Jessica and I love Jackie. I want to marry Jessica and formally adopt Jackie. I want to provide for them, protect them, and be the father Jackie deserves. And the alleged pregnancy situation with your ex-wife? There was no pregnancy, Your Honor. My ex-wife fabricated medical records to manipulate me into reconciling with her. My attorney has documentation proving the fraud, which we're happy to submit to the court. Mr. Kemp, Judge Williams said, I'm seeing a pattern of behavior that's troubling. You abandoned your family when they needed you most, left them destitute, and now you're seeking custody not because you want to be a father, but apparently to punish Miss Horton. When did you last feed this child? Change his diaper? Get up with him in the middle of the night? Billy's silence was damning. I'm denying your petition for custody and awarding full legal and physical custody to Ms. Horton, effective immediately. Furthermore, I'm granting Ms. Horton's request for a protective order. But he's my son. No, Mr. Kemp, you contributed genetic material. That doesn't make you a father. Court is adjourned. As the courtroom emptied, Jessica found herself face to face with Brad for the first time in 3 days. Without speaking, they moved toward each other, and when Brad's arms closed around her, Jessica felt like she could finally breathe again. I'm so sorry, Brad whispered. I'm sorry I let you leave. I'm sorry I didn't fight for us. You thought you were doing the right thing for your child. There was no child. There was only Donna's lies and my own stupidity. He pulled back to look at her. Jessica, I love you. I love Jackie. I never want to spend another day without you. Before Jessica could respond, Leo appeared with a fussy, red-faced Jackie in his arms. Someone wants his mama, Leo said, handing the baby over. Jessica burst into tears as Jackie settled against her chest, his crying immediately subsiding. Hey, baby boy, she whispered. Mama missed you so much. Brad reached out and touched Jackie's tiny hand, and the baby immediately gripped his finger. Jessica, Leo said gently, Brad asked me to prepare some papers for you. Jessica looked up questioningly as Leo handed her a legal document. Adoption papers, Brad explained, for Jackie, and... He dropped to one knee right there in the courthouse hallway, pulling a ring box from his pocket. Marriage papers for us. Jessica Horton, will you marry me? Will you let me be Jackie's father and your husband? Jackie chose that moment to reach for Brad, making his happy gurgling sounds. "I think that's a yes from Jackie," Jessica said through her tears. "What about from you?" Jessica looked at this man who'd fought for her, who'd lost himself looking for her, who'd been willing to give up everything for the chance to love her and her son. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes to all of it." When Brad kissed her, right there in the courthouse hallway with Jackie between them, Jessica finally understood what it meant to come home. 6 months later, standing on a pristine beach in the Bahamas, with Jackie toddling through the sand between them while Brad officially adopted him and they exchanged wedding vows, Jessica realized that the most powerful love stories weren't the effortless ones. They were the ones that tested you, demanding you become braver, stronger, and more generous than you believed possible. They were the ones that began in devastation and built something magnificent from the ruins. As they danced to music only they could hear while Jackie laughed and reached for the crystalline waves, Jessica knew their story was just beginning. There would be more challenges, more joy, more life to build together. But they would face it all as a family, and that made them invincible. The beginning of forever.